kind of building block that we put together. And I just wanted to comment that like these are the 4 sorts of, I guess, activity spaces that we operate in, but throughout that we're always thinking around 4 main principles and values that we try and apply to all of this. So openness is absolutely critical. Open source, open access and open science are fundamental to what we do, because we think that those approaches are the best way to spread information quickly with minimal transaction costs and give people the most opportunity to use the technologies and the knowledge downstream. So by open, everything that we produce, typically speaking, is available for others to use, reuse, build on, redistribute, use commercially. We always make stuff that is available for any purpose. And the commercial piece is important. So we want people to be able to innovate and move this technology through to products. And so entrepreneurship is very important. And we do work on directly programs encouraging bio-entrepreneurship in the sense of setting up companies, but I think it's more also having a sort of entrepreneurial mindset of how to solve problems, how to make links outside of academic institutions and into civil society, into charity sector, into social enterprises as well. So we have quite a broad approach to entrepreneurship, but it's incredibly important. And all of this is done very collaboratively. So that's absolutely key. We try and co-create and co-design solutions to problems with the people that would be using the technology on the ground. And we try and do this with a mindset of equity and trying to maintain a kind of equal footing, that everybody in the collaboration or the partnership has a voice and is, you know, equally valued. Of course, it's very difficult to do this sometimes when there's very clear asymmetries in terms of resourcing of projects and potentially also asymmetries in terms of access to information and experience. But, you know, we try our best and it's a learning experience. So that's the kind of the 4 areas that I'm just going to briefly introduce with a quick example for each, because it's quite a short talk. So I just wanted to give you some snippets of the type of work that we've been doing, and hopefully it ties together at the end when we hear from Maboa Lab Biotech, who are close collaborators in Cameroon, who we've been working with since 2019. And Stefan Verdanker, the executive director of Maboa Lab Biotech, has put together a great video that kind of shows the journey of that collaboration. And I hope that it will illustrate, you'll be able to see something of these frameworks in that story. But first off, we'll just go to DNA toolkits. So as I mentioned, we want to manufacture enzymes in particular because they have a specific issue with supply chains having to maintain cold storage, which often doesn't work. And so we have DNA toolkits that enable you to produce enzymes within E. coli. We also collaborate with groups that have made toolkits for Bacillus subtilis and other bacteria, and Pichia pastoris, a yeast as well. So we have there's a range of toolkits out there, not just ours, to enable you to do this bioproduction. And surprisingly, that still, even though many of the kind of commercial bioproduction systems have been off patent for a very long time, they're still quite expensive to purchase and the licensing fees are very high. So this offers an alternative, which we hope will be much easier to kind of distribute. Particularly, we have an open material transfer agreement, which means that you are able to redistribute this material to your colleagues, collaborators, whoever wants it, without restrictions, and that also you can use it commercially. So we have distributed to companies, including companies in Cameroon and South Africa, that are using our DNA to manufacture products. So the Open Enzyme Collection is kind of our core DNA collection. It's around 60 different enzymes that are useful in molecular biology research. It's a bunch of different reporter proteins as well, fluorescent proteins, for example, so you can track production or do all sorts of other interesting experiments. There's tags to help you with purifying the enzymes. There's a bunch of regulatory elements to control where and how and when the enzymes are actually expressed, and some other useful pieces for, you know, cleaving off bits, having additional solubility domains, this kind of thing. So there's a lot in there. In fact, there are 200 interchangeable elements, but in a very synthetic biology way. The intention is that you can effectively build your own protein expression system using these like Lego blocks and sticking them together. In our earlier collections, the Lego block analogy only goes so far, because you actually have, we've sort of only provided the DNA itself. You have to design the linking system. But during COVID, we did another collection called Research and Diagnostics Collection, where we did actually design how the blocks fit together. So we added a syntax, which basically determines in what order the blocks will connect when you try and link them up. And so this is very helpful for people who just want a sort of easy assembly system. And we're trying now to kind of go back to our previous collections and insert them into this same framework as well. But the Research and Diagnostics Collection just focused on 20 coding sequences that were really critical for PCR and for a number of other isothermal amplification techniques. So basically got PCR alternatives that are more suited to low resource contexts. And so this was distributed to many labs around the world and was used in quite a number of projects. And if you look across all of the collections, we're in about, we've got collections in about 500 labs in around 50 countries. As you can tell, there are quite a lot of countries in Africa that still do not have these. So if you would like them, do get in touch. We are very happy to send them to you. And yeah, we hope to continue growing that user community. In terms of reagents, we're always thinking about ways to make protocols for manufacturing the enzymes and for using them safer, greener, from more locally available materials, and also more affordable. And so one example is that when you express proteins in E. coli, in order to kind of switch the protein expression on, commonly you add a chemical called IPTG. And this is not the most expensive chemical, but it is a specialist chemical. We were having some challenges with its stability when we shipped it to Cameroon, and so we started looking at alternatives. Fortunately, for a long time, it's been known that lactose can also induce this same the same expression system, and lactose is found in milk. So we were able to test a number of milk products, including boiled milk, whey, and milk powder, and showed that basically all of them induced expression of our enzyme. And so we've defaulted now to using dried milk powder because it's readily available in almost all countries. And so it's really simple. And we use this auto-induction system where we add the lactose into the media for the bacteria. However, in doing this, we had a problem that if you add milk into liquid culture, so normally you'd be growing the bacteria in liquid, it goes cloudy, and that's a bit confusing because it kind of looks like there's something growing in it already. And so we basically decided we'd try and grow the bacteria on a petri dish. So if you grow them in culture, you need quite large equipment, for example, shaking incubators that will aerate the cultures. And you also need large volume centrifuges, which some of our collaborators did not have. So the next thing that we tried was basically plating our milk powder containing media, adding some agar to it so it gels, and putting it in a standard petri dish. That first one you saw was a very rich version of the media. The second one is just not a very rich, which is why the cells are very sparse on there. So we clearly don't use that one. It was just a control. And this is my former postdoc Chiara Gandini scraping off the cells from the media, and you can see there's a lot of them. They're quite happy. There's a very nice lawn there. And she can immediately put that into a tube and start processing it and extracting the proteins with no need for a centrifuge or other equipment. So in these two ways, we kind of cut down the number of specialist chemicals that were required and swapped in a very affordable and very locally available material. And we also reduced the equipment requirements substantially for this process. And just to show that it is also effective, so that one plate can deliver around about 10,000 PCR reactions worth of DNA polymerase. And this is just evidence that we have a protein. You can see the protein here on the dark spot. It's not as much as in liquid culture, but the convenience of the technique kind of outweighs that. And so here we're expressing OpenVent, which is an enzyme that's used in PCR for amplifying DNA, and we really like it because it's incredibly thermostable. So it's really easy to then store it at room temperature and also ship it without a cold chain, which is of course fantastic given all the challenges that we discussed before. And we've also shared openly the protocol on protocols.io. So if you want to try it out in your lab, you can head along and give it a go. And so this technique is now being deployed in Cameroon to produce products. We will come back to this later. There is a great video from Ebola Biotech, but basically they're making DNA polymerases, master mixers, and other PCR products locally, and have a number of kind of business advantages as well. Of course, the main one being that this product is local, so it's in the country and the shipping is very fast. But also, as mentioned, they're ambient temperature shippable, no cold chain, and there's a number of other advantages too for customers, like being able to pay on mobile money. So that's a little bit about some of the technology and the reagents. In terms of training, we always try to make that adaptable, self-maintaining, in the sense that we try and train people such that they have the skills to manufacture the reagents that are used in the training course, so then they can go forward and train other people as well. And we try and make it useful and as tailored as possible to the needs of the trainees. So we've to date trained over 250 scientists in how to assemble DNA and how to manufacture proteins recombinantly in E. coli. And we've hosted over now 9 internships in Cameroon and 2 master students who've done most of their project work with me, one of whom is now in my group in Cambridge as a PhD student. Our last enzyme manufacturing masterclass was in April in Kenya with 25 participants from Kenya and Ethiopia, where we were learning how to make DNA polymerase. And we had some great feedback from that. So people liked it, which was excellent. They had fun, but also the idea of being able to produce their own cost-effective molecular reagents was really inspiring to the cohort, and in turn to us, it was great to see that it was so well received. But yeah, we're still developing that course, and we're hoping to run a more advanced one in Ethiopia next year, including expression of Cas9 and some other CRISPR related reagents. So all of this only works if you have a lab space, as I mentioned before, and unfortunately they're often in short supply in many of the countries where we collaborate, or they exist, but they're perhaps within an institution that makes them quite difficult to access for anyone who's not part of that institution. And so you'll see later that in Cameroon, we've set up an independent lab that people from multiple universities are now using for molecular biology work. And in Kenya, we're working with the Kenyatta University and a number of other partners to build AfriBioHub, which is and still in construction, hence the beautiful mocked up image rather than photos, but it should be ready in the next few months. A lovely lab for training researchers, providing mentoring, and also incubating early stage biotechnology projects. And there's unfortunately limited access to bioinnovation labs for molecular biology, for gene editing, and for other techniques, which will be embedded in this lab. And so we're excited about that. We hope it will be we'll learn a lot, and we hope it will be potentially a model for others to adopt elsewhere in the region. So do get in touch if that's something that you would be keen to explore or follow along as we progress. So we've kind of got some technology, we've got a space, but we really need to build the community as well. And so a lot of the people and projects that I just mentioned are connected through a program called Reclone that we put together to basically link all of these groups that are doing fantastic work and make sure that they can talk and exchange those the knowledge. And so you can find out more on reclone.org. But Reclone is basically trying to set up regional reagent hubs to share those DNA collections more broadly. And we're starting, we have 3 hubs being set up in Argentina, in Ghana, in the Philippines at the moment. Building that global and distributed community. We have fortnightly community meetings and calls, and infrequent but very interesting symposia where we take a bit of a deeper dive into topics of interest to the community. And we're also kind of trying to convene a repository of all of the open access education and training resources that have been delivered through disparate projects. So really trying to kind of form a bit of an umbrella over some of these activities and provide a central hub where people can find other people and other pieces of knowledge and also materials. And so one of those examples is we record our fortnightly community calls. And so I'd highly recommend checking out the Reclone YouTube channel. We featured just a couple of months ago, Jordi Ali talking about biotechnology in Ethiopia. Our call this week was from Joseph Schenke at the University of Aleppo in Syria, talking about some of his work and also some of the challenges of doing research in Syria, which from a supply chain perspective is incredibly challenging. We've talked about suggestions for new and enhanced protein expression strains with Daniel Guerra from Peru. It's been a really enriching series of meetings. And so if you'd like to present your work or kind of meet other people, primarily from the Global South, who are doing very interesting work around protein expression, molecular biology, synthetic biology, do join us. It'll be great to see you there. And now I'd just like to play a short video that I hope kind of summarizes in one journey how we've managed to fit together technology, community, and enterprise into supporting the establishment of enzyme manufacturing activities in Cameroon. So I'm just going to have to briefly stop sharing while I change tabs. So please bear with me a second because it's on a different tab. So, and I'm hoping that the share screen will let me share the audio as well, hopefully. Interesting. It's not letting me share screen at all now. This is not good. Can you still see and hear me? I might just have to, it's not letting me share the screen again for some reason. It's not clicking on the share screen. So if you could bear with me 2 seconds, I'm just going to leave and enter again. Hi, I'm back and now I can connect the screen again. Apologies for the interruption. Can you see the screen now?
Yeah, we can't see it.
You can see it? Okay, perfect. Bear with me 2 seconds because I've just got to share again and share the sound. Okay, all right. Apologies for the slight technical hitch, but hopefully this will work. You see and hear this. All right, apologies for the interruption with the tech, but that was just a quick summary of 4 years of work in which we've tried to kind of enact that framework of technology, developing, co-developing and transferring technology to Mobile Lab Biotech, instigating training and community building both locally in Cameroon and also with a whole bunch of South-South collaborations that you hopefully saw there. And then also pushing the enterprise side. And as far as we know, Mobile Lab Biotech are the only biotech startup in Cameroon that are using recombinant protein expression, and also investigating techniques that are definitely kind of getting into the synthetic biology space. For example, they've hosted projects on CRISPR diagnostics in collaboration with my group in Cambridge as well. And that kind of, I think, summarizes the journey of how we've tried to enact in one place that framework to enable access. I'd say we're still very much at the beginning and there's a long way to go to achieve what we want, which is ubiquitous access to these reagents, so that access to enzymes and reagents in general is not the limiting factor that kind of holds back the creativity and productivity of scientists in the global south, and of course particularly in the African region, which is where a lot of my work has focused over the last few years. So hopefully that's given you a sort of a few stories and vignettes about how we've been trying to tackle supply chain challenges in the region. And I'd like to say thank you to Stefan Verdanker and his team for putting together that video, and of course to my lab and all of the many collaborators that have contributed to the projects that you saw. And I'm very open to questions. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Dr. Molly. Dr. Molly requested to have 5 questions straight away, 2 or 3. She's going in for a meeting and then probably go to our next presenter. Then later on, we shall take on questions for Dr. Chigundu. So we can get the questions ready for her. The mic is moving, just
Thank you so much, Dr. Molly, for that presentation and the most exciting work that you do is Mobile Lab, and that I've been following up is other one in Biolab in Ghana. So definitely what I was asking is about, as you are trying to improve access supply chain of lab supplies in Africa, and which is interesting because this has been one thing that Africa has been struggling with in shipping reagents and other things, of course, the continent here. So mine is about like how far do you think about extending this, because most of us you have shown us been operating in West Africa and for the most time, and extending now to Kenya. But I think like I would like to know whether you have plans of coming up with those strategies to come more East Africa and the other part of South Africa, because most of the work that's being done there, they're still trying to get the things international, and yet you have now reagents that can be accessed easily in the western part of Africa. So that I would like to know where the plan is to extend this work to other parts. Yeah, thank you.
Shall I go straight ahead and answer that one? It's a great question, and yes, so it would be fantastic to extend this further. I think the limiting factors, as ever, are time and money, and so and also this does take time. I mean, what I showed you with Mobile Lab was 4 years of very hard work, and you know, we're still pushing that forward and sort of, you know, trying to find what works and what doesn't, and what can really kind of make the most impact. So I think yes, and the plan would be to embark on new partnerships where we know that we have some chance of a kind of long-term partnership, not just a one-off, but that we can actually push something forward that's meaningful, and connect into the network. So I think the more people that we are starting to establish, then kind of in a sense we're sort of removing the need for my group itself to be part of the equation, and then we stop being the bottleneck, and the groups that we've already trained can kind of connect together and pass that knowledge on and work. That's the sort of ultimate goal, is that we have a network that can kind of expand organically, without one single person or one single group being the challenge. But yes, and actually This isn't publicly announced yet, although it will be at the start of next week, but from September, I'll be taking up a group leader position at the International Centre for Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology, who are a UN research institute with 66 member countries, most of which are low and middle income countries. And so I am hoping to use that position and that network as a platform to reach more places. And yeah, I'd encourage you to get in touch and we can brainstorm possibilities. I mean, it would be fantastic to see something like this in every country, but you know, we've got a long way to go. So fingers crossed that the resources and the political interest and the kind of excellent people flow through and we can make that happen.
Thank you. Another question?
Thank you so much, Dr. Modi. My question to you is that for example, there is limited access to most of the free agents. And most cases, due to that demand, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, there was huge demand for extraction kits across the world. So my question to you is that you support the bird with that come up with in-house kit designs to get certifications. They are in-house kit designs for giving approval so that you can improve the planning.
Great. It was a little bit faint. So I think the question was around extraction kits and if there are also like protocols for locally manufactured or in-house extraction kits, but I might have missed an extra question at the end. So I'm going to answer the first one and then please let me know if I missed something. Yes, so there are a number of extraction kit recipes online that are available. I think one of the challenges, so we have made buffers in Cameroon. We haven't gone quite down the level of extraction kits yet. The challenge with extraction kits is really just you have to maintain an incredibly clean environment for larger volumes of liquid than you do when you're preparing something like a master mix. And so that is totally doable, but it does require some infrastructure in terms of, you know, cleaner rooms and hoods, that kind of thing. So yes, it's definitely possible. There's a disconnect though between, so we've produced a reagent kit for research in diagnostics, and all of the diagnostics that we're producing are research use only. They are the same thing as you would use for diagnostics, but if you want to use something in a diagnostic setting, typically you would be needing to have that manufactured under a quite strict quality control system. Typically, the international standard is ISO 13485, that's the formal one. But this is the kind of step change between local manufacturing of research use reagents and local manufacturing of diagnostics. And that's an area that we're interested in. I've explored that a lot. We haven't done it yet. But I think, you know, I think it's possible. And certainly for kind of non-diagnostic extraction kits, yes, there are a lot of recipes. There's some very nice recipes for homemade magnetic beads as well. So obviously, if you use the silica column extraction methods, then they're quite difficult to make. I mean, plastic is difficult in general, but there are some interesting recipes online. There's a site called Bomb Bio, for example, which has recipes for making your own magnetic beads for magnetic extractions, which is quite nice. We've used their protocols before. And also we're publishing soon, hopefully, a paper with a slightly simpler method for making the magnetic beads for DNA extractions. So yeah, there's a lot out there, and a lot of this innovation has come from groups in resource constrained labs. So a lot of really nice recipes are coming out of Africa or Latin America that have been really nicely validated, really well done. And so, yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Molly. Let's just give an applause for her, please. So here we have into our last presenter, that is Dr. Adrienne Lusa. Dr. Adrienne Lusa, she's going to take us through leveraging the stakeholder engagement to navigate the complexities of Africa's biotech ecosystem. Let me rush it, go through her data. Dr. Adrienne Lusa is an accomplished professional with expertise in life science and healthcare industry. Yeah, Adrian has deep knowledge of different cultures and in navigating various businesses environments across Africa. The areas such as on research science, concentrate on development of projects for pharmaceuticals, biotech applications, and has held various high-profile roles in the industry. Adrian also shares a deep understanding of the challenges, opportunities in the industry, having spent 20 years plus in the stakeholder management across life of science and the healthcare ecosystem. She has helped organizations build nations, maintain effective relationships with key stakeholders. She's also the founder of also the African Biotech Conversation podcast. Well, hope that's it. So Adrian is now she's now a managing director of Sunlux Limited, and consulting, helping companies in the life science and healthcare industry in Africa, building and maintaining effective relationships and partnership with key stakeholders. Her expertise in navigating complex regulatory innovations, building trust and working strong relationships with stakeholders, making her an invaluable resource for companies seeking expansion in Africa. Wow, what a big bio. You most welcome, Dr. Adrian.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much to Geoffrey, who offered me this opportunity to share some of my experiences with you. And hopefully by the end of the session, you would have learned a thing or two about first of all, why you should be talking to your stakeholders, who your stakeholders are, and how you should go about engaging your stakeholders. So I'm not going to say much more about myself because I think that has been covered. And throughout this, this symposium, this conference, we've also talked about all the challenges that biotech startups. So I'm going to focus on biotech startups, which is the subject of this plenary. We've talked about the unique challenges that biotech startups face in Africa. We've talked about lack of funding. The last speaker also highlighted that. We've talked about limited infrastructure, whether that be physical infrastructure in terms of laboratories and manufacturing facilities, or even in terms of skills and human resources. Now, as a biotech startup looking at funding, typically your funding comes from two sources. It could be public sector funding or private sector funding. And there is the infamous valley of death, which usually occurs because at the beginning of your project, your startup, when you've conceptualized that you want to start the journey of biotech entrepreneurship, you usually go for grants. You usually get some small funding, pre-seed funding from donor agencies, even to prove or test your ideas. And then sometime that funding starts running out when you have now set up your pre-feasibility studies and you're looking to start scaling to a certain extent. And sometimes you may get private funding, or you may not. But in between there is the infamous valley of death, which if you don't navigate properly, it really can, we've heard of stories of biotech startups dying. And this is not unique, by the way, to Africa. It is, it's just a journey of biotech entrepreneurship. As a matter of fact, there are two valley of deaths. You know, you start, for those who are starting out as scientists, you get an idea, you probably patent your idea, you go to pilot studies, you get some prototype, it costs you some money, you may get additional funding if you don't die there. Then you go on to, you know, product design, verification, and to somehow you may have something that you could market, but now you need to scale. And there also, if you do not get the kind of capital that is required, you could die in the second valley of death. So that is usually the trajectory for those who are also, you know, young students considering biotech entrepreneurship. This is usually the trajectory that you will take as you embark on this journey. Now, notwithstanding the challenges that we've talked about, there are also opportunities for Africa in the biotech space, especially in the startup space, since most of us are still emerging in this field. There is a large and growing market in Africa. We've spoken about 1.3 billion people. The fact is, Statista actually predicts that the population would double in about 20 years. And also, we are seeing, especially on the heels of the COVID pandemic, that is growing government support, growing momentum to support the sector. So those are all opportunities that you can leverage and start a biotech company. Africa is also known for unique diseases. So apart from the famous ones, we have, you know, unique diseases in our context. We have yellow fever, we have malaria, we have sickle cell, those that are unique to us, but also that affect us more than other population groups. And our rich biodiversity is also unique, that we can leverage to create solutions using biotech. So then you decide that you want to take advantage of these opportunities, you go ahead and you are embarking on the, you know, the trajectory towards creating a biotech startup. I want to know, I think we've discussed the phases previously, but I would like to know by show of hands, who in this room identifies themselves as still in the problem solution fit phase, they're still ideating, they're still conceptualizing a biotech solution. I just want to see by show of hands. Okay, right. And who would identify themselves as committed? You've already had a vision, you founded a company, you have a small team, you guys are a lean startup, you are on your way to creating pilot projects or solutions. Anyone? Okay, great, good to see. And then you've also, I want to see for those who have launched, I know there are quite few, but it will be great to see if they're in the room as well. Those who have launched and are in the process of scaling up. I think Mboa Lab was here. They will be probably within this category or somewhere in between the last and this category. So anyone in the scale up phase? None. Okay. Now my next exercise. I want this to be quite interactive, please. So for, can I get a mic? Thank you. For those who have identified themselves in the so we are going to be doing some sort of interactive exercise. I want us to identify our stakeholders. So remember in the previous slide, some of you put up your hands that you are still in the ideation formation phase. I just want to find out from you, and I'll put in the mic to you because I can't see your hand. If you can just tell me 3 stakeholders, key stakeholders, I think you would make contact with very.
So I'm going to have to make that, so funding bodies. The university itself. And fundamentally, whoever is going to be using.
Those are excellent, excellent examples. Anyone else in the ideation formation phase? Anyone has something different from, sorry, your name? Alex, from what Alex proposed. Anyone? So we are saying, you all put your hands up. You only know about your lab, your university, funding bodies, and those who use your innovation or product. Any other? Okay.
Thank you very much. After us, what we are trying to look on or work on and Africa. But as stakeholders, mostly the farmers and the people, not necessarily farmers, and then people also who are into poultry, because we are trying to look at devices that can capture microbial residues. Okay, so basically that's around the corner. We feel those who are going to be our stakeholders.
Thank you for the specification, but I think it also falls under the category of those who are going to use your product. Any other?
Like from day one, personally, I would love to have kind of like business development, kind of support system, whatever my kids. So I can usually convert my idea into business, be able to prototype quick, not delay science. Yes.
So he's spoken about, business development. I think business support, in addition to his technical skills, he needs business skills or business support. So some other hands, I'll take two more hands and then we can move.
I think in addition to what has been mentioned, particularly if you've done the lawmakers or the government would be at the stakeholder, because when you're starting out something, you want to be sure that you are going to be allowed to be. For example, many companies, individual labs have been doing DNA testing in Uganda, but the minister of health recently came out and said, there are only 2 labs that are licensed to do this, or they are permitted to do this. So whatever you're starting up, the governing framework, the country, or the legal framework is going to be key.
Thank you. So that's one more. We have the regulatory or regulatory institutions as well as government agencies.
Thank you so much. I would look for, first of all, it's like this. I would also look for makers, and also collaborators.
If I may ask, collaborators for what?
For collaborators, my idea, because collaborators is the whole part of if you are working with them.
Okay, so collaborators, peers, I guess people who are more or less the same stage as you are, who can walk the journey with you. So those are excellent answers. So I have a little map here showing your key stakeholders as a biotech startup. I think you've mentioned most of them, government agency, funders. I want you to also think about end users. You've talked about the agricultural part, you were quite specific there. But what about patients, for those who are creating therapeutics? And there are some patients that have actually formed groups. They are organized in groups where they advocate for each other. I don't know if you have those in Uganda, you have some of them in Ghana, especially around rare diseases. I know people suffering from sickle cell anemia, they also have these groups. So you can also, map out those for your specific disease focus areas. You also want to think about healthcare providers. So most of you in the labs, you only have access to pathogen samples. You probably need clinical samples to test or validate your solutions. You want to start making contact with healthcare providers who can give you access to those samples. You also want to think about technology service providers. You are in the labs, you're probably using some really amazing equipment. You probably need technical support as well from those technology providers. Last but not least, maybe you want to consider contract research organizations so that you don't have to do everything by yourself. You can outsource some of the work along the pipeline of your discovery or your project to some of these research organizations. There aren't many in Africa, but there are some. There's quite a good ecosystem of contract research organizations developing in Egypt and quite a few as well in South Africa. Actually, in South Africa, some academic labs double as contract research. So they can actually do contract research for you, both at preclinical, or even if you're doing agricultural work, they can do contract research, testing in the field and things like that. I'm sure in your different countries, you also have examples. So these are people that you should be talking to, right? But now let's move on to how do you actually go talking to these people? Usually what happens is you are not strategic, you are not intentional, you're also not timely. You may be going to them when you are in need, so you seem desperate, you seem suspicious, right? And people are like, hey, back off, what do you want? I don't have anything for you. Because you're coming to them when you want something from them, and they can feel that, they can take that into account, and it causes resistance. So the whole point is, I want us to also do some role playing now before I tell you my thoughts, my experience on how to go about having effective conversations with your different stakeholders. Now that we've talked about stakeholders, I would like some volunteers. Anyone in the room who would like to volunteer being a startup, a biotech startup? Thank you. So the gentleman will be the biotech startup. I'm also just going to ask anyone who would like to volunteer being a government agency, because I think those are very key and we've spoken about it throughout this 3-day conference. Anyone who would volunteer to be a government agency or agent? Thank you. I'd also like a volunteer for the funding, investors, venture capitalists, even donor organizations, people who have the money. Anyone? Thank you. And then let's just have one more representing the end user. So either healthcare provider or even the patient groups. Let's say we are doing health now, human health. Okay. So I want you to, Mr. Startup, can you tell me in a few words first how, and then number 2, when you will engage your end user?
Thank you so much. To be strict, we are with health. Let's say I try to check it, maybe like nutrition. Let's say it's maybe lack of a particular vitamin in the current diet, and my sort of solution is maybe to have a little bit I don't want to use modify that, a better variety using a modern technology. Let's say it's now like a rosemary-based vegetable, and then I'm trying out to roll it out maybe to the mothers in the village. So the best thing to do is I can get in the radio or then about what they're currently investing right now. I can write then that's okay, you know what? Maybe they're not giving enough maybe to this share be able to develop. I think that maybe kind of this, and this, and this, but you can get it in this product. We don't have it here in Uganda, but what we have maybe like maybe one more carrots, but we can improve them. You'll be able to eat them. Your child to have this and this and this and this fire ready.
Show me the how. I want to know the way.
Now the when comes in the like now I'm asking myself, is my product ready? So if my product is ready, so when it comes to the when that it is, I have to deploy it as like in the terms of where you need is so much, and I use like a timing frame of how fast I can. Because I did like I don't think that how specific, but that's next one.
Thank you. So what I can summarize from that is your when is when your product is ready. Your how is really by community radio, some form of dissemination of the fact that you end user have a problem. I have the solution. Right? Any differing opinion to what we just shared? Anyone?
Particularly talk to the when. I think it would be good to start before you even think of, doing the very first experiments on your product. Because you need to establish if there is actually the need for the product that you're proposing, and if the end user even knows that whatever they are using has a problem.
Okay. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to ask, I think someone else to volunteer to be a starter. And I want them to tell me, no, let me start with the investor. No, you are the government agency, agent, investor. Okay, tell me, investor, when do you want to hear from a startup and how?
I would like to hear from setup. Okay, first of all, I would like to get an understanding of what they're doing, but exactly when to hear from them, when I've done someone's back, and at that point, I need to know how far they've come, their journey in terms of what they have done, and also, what they have done so far.
Yeah. So thank you for that. And I'm curious, right? I'd like maybe Christophe to help out. Christophe, can you maybe tell us what typically is of concern to your typical, let's say, pre-seed investor, early stage investor, when they are about to engage with a startup, in your experience?
So, but the major problem is about the concept and that scale. That means that you already prove that your idea is something that you can do to a project. And also the commercialize. That means that you even at the beginning, you need to think about what you are doing at the end. The same also you need to decide the market size, the market wide, and decide what's the target targets at the end. That's it. And also you need to share your idea with people that have the knowledge for that. So you need because then usually you are trying that a big size, a big market size, and usually that's a good idea because the big size is so competitive and so difficult to question. And one point also is be compatible with the regulatory pathway. That's mean also that you are able to think about the regulatory issues and at least not the last but at least that you need to think about timelines.
Yeah, thank you. I just want the government agent. Please, can you just give us your input? At what stage do you want to hear about innovation happening within your territory of authority?
Okay, thank you very much. As a government, it's maybe let me start with it's what the law. That particular startup, I believe, should have like body and calls. I think calls. In that, at the end of the day, we have issue of license, so we are okay whatever they are doing as to do with safety. And of course, like all that line of no harm to the community themselves. Going back to what you're saying, I also bring it in line with what I bring. So for the issue of probably license and government for all the farmers are safe, trying to take the risks that will be made means. That is, of course, going back again to us for having that particular bill passed. We know which body we are under, and then probably take our concept, from it, and the guidelines are well stated. We meet there.
Okay.
Because I know they should be checked somewhere. Then I'm good.
Okay. Thank you. So I will have to maybe rush through a bit because of the sake of time, but I wanted us to get an impression of what we sitting here think who we think our stakeholders are and what we think the stakeholders care about. And I'm just gonna leave it with you from the answers, the comments that we had in the room to think about if that resonates with what, I mean, some of you are sitting in here and you have those roles, right? You are investors, you are government agents. Please, can you also spot the entrepreneurs and make sure that they know what you care about and how you would like to be reached, when you would like to be reached, and so that they polish on some of those tactical issues. So, but from my side, I think some of the principles for successful stakeholder engagement is obviously knowing your stakeholders, communicating early, but not just once off, communicating early and often, listening back. So you also have to be on the receiving end of information. You don't have to be giving information all the time. You also have to create channels where you receive information. And when you do receive that information, be responsive. Let your stakeholders know that you care about their opinion, you take it seriously, and you're taking it into account. And also build trust by being transparent and honest, as well as involving your stakeholders in decision-making. And obviously, if you're going to involve your stakeholders in decision-making, it will be a great idea to start mapping them out very early on and then start involving them from the beginning. Because as we've spoken about throughout this symposium, effective stakeholder engagement will address issues of mistrust and lack of credibility of our biotech solutions. It will address issues of access to expertise and resources. Some of the resources and the expertise you seek are sitting in universities. They are sitting with your strategic partners or collaborators. They are sitting with technology providers. If you don't engage with them, if you don't tell them what you're doing, they won't be able to help you. And also, we've spoken about an enabling environment, regulatory environment. The regulators will only know how to regulate best if they know what you are doing, what you need from them. So we need to also engage them. The patients, the end users, the farmers, we need to address that as well. We need to know what they are having as issues, not us coming to give them solutions, but actually listening what they have as issues so that we can provide solutions using the technologies that we have access to. And then we've also spoken about market access, commercialization, and ethical and social considerations. So if you're going to succeed, you must be patient and you must work the process, right? You can see that it's not a once-off thing. It's not something that you start today because you want to push tomorrow and get funding. It's not something that you start today just because you are on the runway to raise funds or whatever other milestone that you want to achieve. You have to start early and you have to be consistent. You have to build it into your processes. And one of the questions was, what do you think your stakeholders want from you? As a startup or as a biotech startup, most of you are researchers, scientists. You are also subject matter experts. Your stakeholders are counting on you either to know the market, to know the science, to develop solutions to the problems that they face every day. And so you have to show up in different formats that you are a subject matter expert. You could go on radio, you could put up marketing flyers or whatever other means, channels of communication. You could have workshops, you could have, there's so a plethora of ways in which you can show up, but make sure that you build in your strategy that you're going to show up as a subject matter expert that is able to provide value for your stakeholders, because your stakeholders are not always going to just give you stuff. They need something in return for whatever resource or expertise they're offering you. So you also need to do an introspection and think, what is it that I'm bringing on the table for this partnership or, collaboration to work out? And so one of the things I've been involved with is doing a podcast where I interview local, when I say local, I mean African mostly, founders, biotech founders. And so they tell their story, they tell their journey, they share their expertise. So that's one way. Obviously, there are other means, but that's what I've been doing. And most recently, just a couple of weeks ago, we also launched the Dialogue with African Biotech Leaders, which is going to be an online platform for networking and collaboration among biotech entrepreneurs in Africa. So it has already kickstarted. So if you are a biotech entrepreneur, you should also look out for this. It's going to go live, launched during the BioAfrica convention in September in South Africa. So I'm doing this in partnership with Africa Bio, which is a nonprofit organization from South Africa advocating for biotech in Africa. And that is what speaks to that, collaboration, peer-to-peer collaboration. There's also going to be opportunities for mentorship, because we are going to have a tier membership kind of configuration where we'll have women, young entrepreneurs, as well as veteran experienced entrepreneurs. And among that also, we are looking to engage actively the diaspora, Africans who are not necessarily based on the continent. So something else I want to touch on is a lot of people engage in this conversation around collaboration, and we look mostly at doing it ad hoc. So I met you in a conference, or I know you from somewhere. It's based on who knows who. And the way that we also manage the process, it's very random. I send you a couple of emails here and there. There's someone somewhere who's managing it. And even though 60% of CEOs now recognize that alliances, partnerships is a path to, sustainable and impactful growth, unfortunately, only about 50% of these partnerships end up being successful because they are done in an ad hoc way. So another approach that I am doing is to facilitate managing partnerships, especially when you want to do this long-term on a committed contract, which is the best way to go, by the way, because you don't want someone saying, I'll do this for you, and tomorrow there's no follow-up, there's nothing, there was no contract, no commitment, the collaboration was basically based on work. So one of the tools that we use is the Alliance Lifecycle. And as you can see, it's a detailed step-by-step project management process with different tools and frameworks to enable this process to be successful. I've also partnered with Alliance Accelerator, which is a consortium of alliance specialists one is in the UK, the other is in the Netherlands. Anoop is in the UK. Anoop is the gentleman second from your left, and Peter is in the Netherlands. So these are experienced alliance professionals. They've been in the business of coaching and training alliance specialists for over 40 years combined. And so myself and Andrea, we are partnering with them to enable access to their tools, their courses, to anyone who wants to, own their own partnership management by developing skills and capabilities in this area. I'll end by just inviting you. So those are just some aspects of what I do as a consultant specializing in partnerships and stakeholder management. I'll invite you to connect with me via LinkedIn, or you can also see here my contact details. If you want to talk about either I empowering you with the skill sets to be able to manage collaborations, engagements with your stakeholders for effective outcomes, or if you would like us to help you own that process while you focus on the science and the technical part of your business. Right, so I'll end up by saying you need to team up with experts if you want to accelerate innovation and bio-entrepreneurship in Africa. And what I advocate for, or what I help do, is to orchestrate your stakeholders. I help map them out and ensure that there's a lasting commitment to collaborate so that you can overachieve on your goals. On that note, I'd like to thank you all for your attention and for your engagement during this session.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adrian. We have some few questions. I think I want to pass on outside Dr. Chikundu. In the morning we had this presenting about nitrogen fixation. And of course, then we have no demands. Farmers, you understand, we have that no demands. It's a fertilizer, and we use it in your crops.
since the technique down there is to recycle. And when you use it on your crops, you normally get a very big yield, where you see and you have the same synthetic modified. Yet, it's just Kenya that is using this technique, but we have this fertilizer with us, and so all of us understand whether it's Thank you very much. I don't know, sorry. What I know is that a lot of these products have challenges with specifics. The natural fixing bacteria that may be included in the product may not necessarily be the best one for crops, all the crops across. They have been found to be highly specific at strain level and even at crop variety level. But what I know is that a lot of the manufacturers have actually added no more fertilizer in their products. Yeah. So that you actually using standard fertilizer in the product for them to enhance the growth of the product. So I'm most likely think that's the biggest factor that needs to see. Thank you very much. Questions, please. Let's put up your hand. Bring the mic to you. You can both can be Dr. Chigundu and be Dr. Adrian. You know, just put up.
Thank you so much, Adrian, about the presentation about biotech startups. You highlighted well about the challenges that are faced by biotech startups, and I well know that funding is a big problem, majorly here when it comes to Africa as a continent. In terms of accessing funds, most of the startups usually struggle a lot to go on. So you also made a story where you showed how what investors are interested in. But one of the challenges that I've seen here is that most of the investors automatically they want to see function, they want to see proof of concept in terms of you are going to have scalability and all these kind of things. So to you, like who has been in this space and trying to advocate and trying to see that you can get more partnerships? What do you think, or what stage you see is more hard for most of the entrepreneurs, and what would you advise? Because me, I managed to own a startup that is in 2019 that produces mosquito repellent products. And I've been, one of the things that I finished my time on was prototyping, but much better to make sure the product was fit for the customer. But after that, again, I went on to look now for funding to see how can I scale the production of my product. And there became a hard because I know public payment and other things. But what I saw that most people struggle in has been that part of just coming from the concept, prototype, and going forward from that stage. So just from the overview that I've said, maybe if you highlight more how could the entrepreneurs go about this step from the prototype now to getting into a minimum viable product and hitting the ground, majorly on the African continent into the funding. Thank you.
Can I take it?
Okay. Right. Thank you so much for your question. I think it's a very relevant question, and you're right. As you can see here, in your case, like you said, you probably struggled after you've done the technology development, and some people actually struggle from even, getting pilot studies. So I showed here how you can possibly navigate the funding challenge better. It's prioritizing where you get funding from depending on the stage at which you are. There's a lot of grants. I'm not too sure of how the situation is in terms of government grants here in Uganda, but at least I know for one thing that there's now, even at continental, regional levels, funding that is coming through. These agencies are now doing advocacy on behalf of startups to pull together resources, either from government coffers or even from donor agencies, so that they can fund innovation. I'm sure someone mentioned it earlier, but for example, the Africa CDC, one of the 5 pillars of the new public health order is innovation. And even the AU recognizes the value in innovation. So there's a big drive to push innovation in Africa. And so you may want to look at those options, like there probably are grants and public sector funding to help you ideate, even for I think someone mentioned here, looking to get support in business development. Local universities now have tech transfer offices that offer expertise, expert resources in business support. You also have NGOs that are offering access to their networks of people who have started companies and had that experience multiple times. And they are offering free counsel, free advisory roles to help startups pass through, getting a prototype, validating their market, and getting to a point where they can now be appealing to private sector investment. I think if you've navigated the first phase and you have something concrete, you have a good, strong case like Christoph was sharing, you've done all that pre-work, then it becomes a better conversation when you go now trying to find funding for scaling. Nonetheless, we do have a problem of scaling manufacturing sites in Africa, where, based on our infrastructure gaps, we do not have those access to those. Now comes also something I think John mentioned during his presentation. You have a trend now towards virtual biotech companies where you can tap into networks of contract research, contract distribution, and manufacturing organizations that can really significantly cut down the cost of manufacturing and scaling up without you necessarily building the infrastructure. But again, that comes down to you engaging those people, to you having those conversations and seeing where you can tap into those resources and expertise. I hope that helps. But again, that's why I do what I do, so that I can look at the landscape and one-on-one advise on who would be the best person to address or approach for specific product disease types.
Thank you very much, Doctor. In the interest of time, let's give an applause to our presenters. And I call up Perez, come wind up this. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Alex Katumba. And to our presenters, another round of applause. I feel like they were really exhaustive. Yes, thank you so much. So right now, we are going to go have lunch. I invite students to meet Professor Chris and negotiate if it's still okay. Please, that's upon you now, because we are really running out of time. So let's go have some food, come back as soon as possible. And I'm making it 30 minutes. I'm actually coming with you. You just see me stepping out, and just know by the time I'm here, I'm just continuing. And then I will make sure to come with Dr. Mike to come and make the keynote. I'm going to record, so if you delay, I'll play for you. But I'll be sure to be here with him. So thank you so much. Let's have, and please pray for the food. Enjoy your meal. See you soon.
Yeah. You need to put it.